region, but also to our state and, of course, our most immediate area of Mount Pleasant. So we felt it a great idea, obviously, to bring on our Congressman, Mr. Joe Cunningham, to give some thoughts. And then obviously, too, Representative, we do have some questions that we would love for you to answer after you give your remarks. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is give you a formal introduction, sir, if I may. Congressman Joe Cunningham represents South Carolina's 1st Congressional District, which includes Mount Pleasant, Charleston, Kiawah, and Hilton Head. He serves on the House Natural Resources and the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Prior to his election to Congress, Congressman Cunningham was an attorney and an ocean engineer. In Congress, his priorities include reinstating the ban on offshore drilling off the Atlantic coast, infrastructure investment, protecting and creating low-country jobs, combating climate change, and lowering the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs. Congressman Cunningham is also working to ensure low-country veterans and their families receive the best and most reliable care, services, and benefits. Congressman Cunningham attended the College of Charleston, obtained his BS in Ocean Engineering from Florida Atlantic University and his JD from Northern Kentucky University. He lives on James Island with his wife, Amanda, and their son, Boone, and their dog, Teddy. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Joe Cunningham. Sir?
Shane, thanks so much. Rebecca, thank you as well. Appreciate you all having me and appreciate everything the Chamber is doing, especially in these strange and uncertain times. And first and foremost, I hope everyone on the call, everyone listening, hope you all are safe and healthy, and I hope your families are as well. It's been incredibly stressful and frustrating these last several weeks. I understand I'm back home now and have been for a bit. Been pretty much back home for the last 6 weeks, working in district with the exception of a trip up to Washington, D.C. last week to replenish the funds in the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And flying up there, I flew out of Charleston at 1:30 on Thursday afternoon, and it was the very first flight leaving the airport with 8 people on board, and then they had 6 people on the way back. So it's just a very, very strange new reality we're in. But I wanted to, Shane, if you don't mind, I wanted to briefly just touch on, what the latest round did, this vote last week of the Paycheck Protection Program. It replenished those funds there. So it included about $310 billion in additional funding for the PPP, and about $30 billion reserved for community-based lenders, small banks, and credit unions, and then another $30 billion for medium-sized banks and credit unions. I'm sure we'll get into talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, but one of the biggest criticisms I've heard and through this process is that a lot of the smaller businesses aren't getting access to those funds. So having that $60 billion allocated for those smaller to medium-sized banks, which in turn would theoretically service small to medium-sized companies, is a good way for us to earmark that money. Now, the program is not perfect, and I won't say that it is, but we do talk to a lot of more businesses nowadays in the last few days that are getting some of the funds that they're deserving. Let's see here. That latest package also included about $75 billion in critical funding for hospitals and healthcare workers on the front lines, including the purchases of PPEs. So also included $25 billion for testing, which is critical when we talk about slowly reopening the economy and reopening things to the public. Making sure we have that widespread testing is a cornerstone of any type of reentry to the market. So a lot of good things in that latest round, but that's just kind of a brief overview, and we can dive into more of the details as we go along. But I just want to kick things off and kind of give you an idea of where we stand with that as to date. So thanks again for having me on here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we've got a number of questions that have come in, obviously, for you. But before we get into those, is there anything else that you wanted to communicate to the folks watching right now? I know, obviously, the PPP has been the hot topic as we move through this crisis and as we get through this situation. A lot of folks are asking, how can they be involved? How can this process be easier for a business? But other than that, is there any other situation or topics that you'd like to cover that our members should be aware of?
I would encourage the members, if you have any issues, feel free to reach out to our office, and to the extent we can help, we will. And that goes with any type of federal issue. Our office is still open. The phone lines are directed to our caseworkers and our staff, and it's been very busy, but it's also a very stressful time for small business owners. I wanted to just let the folks on the call know that we do recognize the severity of this crisis, and I talk to small business owners every single day, and I know a lot are frustrated with the log jam within certain programs, whether it be PPP, or unemployment compensation or otherwise. But obviously, the systems are receiving the highest influx that they've ever received on some of these matters. So I want to just remind folks that we continue to work and continue to be available should you have any issues. And look, as this goes on, I just want to remind people that there's things that the government can do on the federal side. There's legislation, there's funds, but there's also a good bit of social responsibility that goes along with this right now. And I think it's incumbent upon each and every one of us as citizens, or as business owners, or as employers, to do anything and everything we can to flatten the curve, to stop the spread of this virus, and to take care of one another. We talk about businesses, but in reality, those businesses are owned by our friends, our families, or our neighbors. And so continuing to support those businesses however we can, whether it be ordering takeout for restaurants, or doing whatever you can for these smaller businesses, but also from the perspective of being a good neighbor, friend, or family member, check in on some of the older people that may be in your neighborhood or in your family that may be experiencing more anguish from this isolation, because as you cut off people's contact to visitors and the like, we also have to take into consideration people's mental health and how people are coping with this, because it is a drastic shift from the norm. So encourage everyone to keep an eye out on their family members, friends, or neighbors, particularly those who have been more isolated.
Well, Congressman, obviously, again, we really appreciate your time today. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions that we received from our members. The first I'll start with is the $2 trillion legislation included $100 billion in emergency funds to compensate hospitals and other healthcare providers for lost revenue. What is the status of fund delivery to our local hospitals, such as MUSC?
Well, it's a good question. And $50 billion of the funds have been distributed according to healthcare providers' share in medical reimbursement. So that's kind of the standard. As far as South Carolina goes, the hospitals and the providers received, there's a number, about $583,693,452. So, just under $600 million of that general allocation. HHS has announced that the other $50 billion will be distributed in targeted allocations. So money has been set aside for rural hospitals and areas heavily impacted by COVID-19, and the providers helping many of the uninsured. So more is yet to come on that as well.
Thank you for that. Elder care, is there any funding for facilities that provide memory skilled nursing care? Due to the COVID-19, these facilities cannot admit new patients. Any feedback on that?
Yeah, the long-term care facilities, including those that provide memory and skilled nursing care, are eligible for the same targeted and general funds available to other healthcare providers. So that's something to keep in mind. And Congress just added $75 billion to the fund for healthcare providers. So, that as that was drawn down, we went back and replenished some of the funds in that as well.
Okay, our next question, the PPP capped employee salaries at $100,000. In light of the recent news reports detailing the many 100,000 plus salary commitments associated with, for example, Illinois, New York, and California's pensions, would you support a taxpayer bailout of state governments by the U.S. government? Again, that's a question from one of the members.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you I support giving the states the support that they need to combat the coronavirus. And funds for the COVID-19 response should be used on the COVID-19 response effort, not on unrelated programs, but some of this discretion would be left up to the states.
And that's really where it comes down to, right? Is obviously the federal government is there to assist, but ultimately the states are making the decisions. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a lot of these resources and funds down to the state level, and how the governor and DHEC proposes to allocate those. But we're focused on just getting the money back inside South Carolina, and we feel like once it's in the state, then we can do a pretty good job of holding people accountable and making sure those funds get to where they need. And look, we're seeing about some serious disparities in our state. Even though African Americans make up about a quarter of the state's population, they're resulting in over half of the deaths related to COVID-19, and that has a lot to do with a lot of these rural hospitals and rural areas being left behind, not just now, but in the past as well. And so, look, we've got a lot of disparities in our healthcare system, in our education system as well. And those are magnified and just exasperated when a pandemic like this occurs, and we see it up close and personal as to those disparities. So, we've been charged with bringing that money back to the state. We've been delivering on that, and we trust that the governor and the state agencies can get those resources to the areas that need them most.
All right, sir, another question. With millions of Americans out of work and looking to Washington to help them survive financially, why is it that Congress couldn't simply pass a clean bill providing the necessary assistance?
Yeah, hey, that's a great question, and I hear you. I mean, the partisanship that exists in Washington, D.C., is particularly with the run-up to this bill. It was bad on both sides, and we don't have any problem calling out both sides of it. Americans needed relief yesterday, and each day that went by in replenishing the PPP or getting that stimulus package to the finish line was a day that businesses were in the red and considering closing. And as you know, Shane, a lot of these businesses that close will not be opening back up again. So I was frustrated too. I'm happy though ultimately that leaders on both sides of the aisle finally put partisan politics aside. And we actually got something done with broad bipartisan support and got it to the president's desk to sign. And I'll just add on here. I know this is mainly chamber focused and business focused, but I'd be remiss if I didn't reiterate that while we're doing some of those things, replenishing the PPP, Congress can still chew gum and walk at the same time. I mean, we can still work on other issues. And I was excited that the president signed into law my bill, the VA Telehearing Modernization Act, which allows veterans to appeal their benefits claims from the comfort of their own home on a Zoom like this or Skype instead of having to drive to Columbia. So while it's a little bit different than some of the interests that the chamber may have or relating to businesses, it is important to our veterans in our district. And I'm glad that we've got a very strong record of putting politics aside and actually getting things done. And I think that bill that was signed into law a couple weeks ago was just a clear example of that.
Well, thank you for that answer to a very pointed question. Getting away from the member questions for a moment, if I just may ask you a couple of questions. You talk to your constituents, you're talking to a lot of business owners, a lot of business professionals. What is your feel for our direction moving forward? Do you feel like there's a sense of positivity that things are going to be okay in the short term, or is it still folks are still kind of in shock at some point and not really sure what to do? What's your overall feel of where folks are right now in the state?
I mean, people are hurting right now, Shane, and with good reason. I mean, this has taken its toll on our nation, both financially, emotionally, physically. This has been something that's been a true challenge for our district, our state, and our country. But I am 100% confident that we're going to make it through this. We're going to push through to the other side. I mean, as South Carolinians, we've dealt with a lot before, and here in Charleston, in our district, we've seen a lot of issues. But I think it's these times where character counts and where you see the true strength of a of a community. And what I've seen so far throughout our community, people circling the wagons and doing what they can to support the food and bev industry, tourism industry, which is the lifeline of our economy down here, and people pulling together. It's been just remarkable. But we can't lose sight of the fact that these smaller businesses are the intended recipients of a lot of these funds from PPP or the stimulus package. And it's highly important that these funds be shepherded in a way that benefits them first and foremost. Was the stimulus package perfect? No. What was the PPP perfect? No. There's some things that I would like to change, and the things that I've advocated for, some of which have made it, some of which have not. I think that, judging by the character of our community, I have no doubt that we're going to make it through on the other side, but there may be some short-term pain in the process.
Well, obviously, too, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, decisions both in federal, state, and local governments had to be made quickly. And so when you look back at the decisions that were made, those decisions were made with the information that was available at the time, and obviously doing everything possible to ensure not only the safety of constituents and consumers and residents of the state, but also business owners, and getting into the PPP and the funding and helping businesses move forward with this new normal.
Yeah, it is. And as you mentioned, Shane, these aren't easy decisions, and they're difficult decisions that have to be made by our elected officials with the best available data at their disposal. And, I firmly believe all of them are making these decisions with the right and purest intention. But they do have significant impacts.
Let's get back to a couple of questions from our members. Sir, PPP effectiveness versus the federal tax credit relief. This is a bit of a long-winded question, but I'll get through as quickly as I can. During a previous webinar a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation about the PPP and its value to businesses such as salons that are closed and cannot employ people at this time anyway. For those businesses, it is a loan that needs to be repaid and a small percentage that is forgiven. There is frustration that elected officials expound the virtues of PPP but may not understand them in depth for a small business owner. What needs to be addressed more is the employee retention tax credit. It does not provide liquidity but can provide some relief when we are able to reopen and rehire. Thoughts on effectiveness regarding tax credit relief?
Yeah, well, it's a great point of question. And I hear from so many small businesses that have been impacted by this crisis. It's clear that, that everyone needs immediate relief. And we need I think taking a step back, we need to ensure that programs like the Paycheck Protection Program will not just work on paper, but in practice, and that small businesses that truly need it have access to it. And, we've touched briefly on some of the shortcomings of the PPP. One of which has to do with the amount of time they're given to rehire or retain employees, through June or July, when in reality it needs to be expanded probably past August, because by allowing businesses more time, people aren't going to come into restaurants until they feel comfortable. And so paying employees to tend the bar and look at empty bar stools just doesn't make sense from a business perspective. The CARES Act established an employee retention credit that is 50% of up to $10,000 in wages paid by an eligible employer whose business has been financially impacted by COVID-19. The tax credit is a good start, but it doesn't really address the immediate liquidity challenges faced by so many small businesses that we're hearing from. But I think moving forward, I think with the tax credits, all these things need to be on the table, and we should recognize that no one program or initiative can save our economy on its own, but these things have to be looked at in the conglomerate as a whole, and how we might be able to help out employers.
Well, let's move on to the reopening, which hopefully will be a phased-in situation. We phased out of normal into this current reality. We have to phase into our new normal. So with state parks reopening on May 1st, although on a limited basis, do you know when we can expect city and county parks to reopen? In Mount Pleasant, council voted to open up the 35 parks. Any thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it sounds like Governor McMaster is going to leave these decisions up to individual jurisdictions and municipalities, which I support. We've been very vocal about, especially some of these coastal towns, like Isle of Palms or Sullivan's or Folly Beach, allowing those mayors, because it's those resources, their resources, they're going to have to allocate, and it's those police officers or first responders that are going to be on the front lines, and they're going to be possibly exposed. So they have to deal with it. So I think extending them the autonomy that I think that they deserve is a good step. But when we talk about reopening, one of the things we need to consider, and there's a few different things to consider as we begin to reopen, but widespread testing. I talked to a rural health center yesterday, and they just don't have the number of tests that they need. And being able to effectively, efficiently, and quickly test people for this virus gives us a better sense of security on what our efforts in flattening the curve and getting on the backside of this. So I say that to say that testing is a critical piece of reopening, and the bill that we passed last week included $25 billion for coronavirus testing, which is a crucial part of safely reopening the economy.
Well, Congressman, let's get into schools. I know this has been a big topic. When do you think the kids can get together again in schools? Obviously, the school year this year has been shut down, but moving forward, any insight to when we might see kids going back to school? Will it be a regular go back in August, or do you think we might be longer than that?
Shane, as a father of a 2-year-old who's at home, I hope as soon as possible. Like everyone else.
You're ready tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I tell you, I had an enormous amount of respect for school teachers to begin with, but after this, having our son at home, it's shot through the roof. But we're in the same boat as a lot of other people. Both parents working from home with small children. I hope it's soon. I do hope it's soon. But it has to be done in a safe way, though. We don't want to take one step forward, only to take 2 steps back. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to ramp up the testing and the tracking of this virus so that it can happen sooner. It can open sooner. But look, the decision to open up needs to be made according to public health experts. It needs to be led by science and facts and testing results, not politics. I think this is a time that everybody comes together and makes these decisions, and large decisions, based upon the facts.
Well, I know we have just a few more minutes of your time. Again, we thank you very much, Congressman Cunningham, for joining us here today. I've got one more question. Beaches and local state governmental controls. Presently, folks cannot access local beaches such as the Isle of Palms, yet the roadways are state maintained. Lines of authority seem to be blurred on that. Do you have any feedback on that? I know, we want to get out and go to the beach, and some of these beaches are still closed down. And there's a question of who has the authority to do what in that situation.
Yeah, and Shane, look, I want to go to the beach too. I took my mutt Teddy to Isle of Palms a lot of mornings, for runs on the beach, and I miss that as well. I'm just as anxious to get them open as the next person, but like I said, it needs to be done in a coordinated and safe and effective manner. I think the takeaway here is highlighting the importance of the communication between the governor and these coastal mayors, so that they can have a coordinated and consistent response effort. As I said, I'm a big fan of letting some of these mayors make some of these decisions because they know what's in the best interest of their constituents, whether it be Mayor Tim Goodwin on Folly or Mayor Jimmy Carroll on Isle of Palms. They're on the ground, and it's those resources that they have to determine what they're going to do with their police officers, what they're going to task them with, and things like that. So again, this all kind of goes back to a efficient and pragmatic and coordinated reopening of the economy and the beaches. But testing is going to play a key part in all of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no giant switch in the sky. We could just flip one day and go, all right, back to normal. We've obviously be smart.
And as we look at the economy, Shane, there's what the government can do as far as lifting orders, but I think we all know that it will be a little bit of a startup time to get some of these patrons into the doors of retail businesses or restaurants or bars or or shopping. Like it's not going to be, like you said, Shane, it's not going to be just a switch you flip. There's going to be some residual impact, and I think we need to anticipate that and recognize that.
Well, I think too, communicating to consumers, the businesses can help with that and say, listen, we're cleaning appropriately, we're social distancing, we're doing the things that we should be doing. It's safe to come to our business. And the hopes are that the consumers will take that action and will go in and obviously solicit that business and buy something from that business, whether it's food or retail or whatever the case may be, just to kind of get the engine going and to get that positivity back in the air so that we can keep moving forward, right?
Right.
Well, Congressman Cunningham, it's been wonderful to see you, sir. I'm grateful that you've taken the time here with us today. I'm glad to see that you're healthy and doing your thing. Thank you very much for taking your time to answer what some were some very pointed questions. Anything else you would like to communicate to our members before we let you go, sir?
No, I just want to thank you all for what you're doing, recognizing these small, medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy. And, my wife and I were small business owners, before being elected to office. And so we recognize that the stress of the small businesses extend far beyond the doors of your office or business and back to your own kitchen table in which you analyze the finances and figure out how you're going to turn a profit every single month. So we're with you on that. And again, I think it's more important than ever for us to stick together as a community, have patience, and be checking up on your neighbors or loved ones, and stick together and have faith. I know that we'll make it through the back end of this, and just wanted to wish everyone well. Hope you stay safe and healthy, and God bless all of you.
Thank you, Congressman. For folks that are watching, if you have additional questions for the Congressman, you can send an email to jose.casey@mail.house.gov. Again, that's jose.casey@mail.house.gov. If you joined us late, this will be up on our website and also our YouTube channel, so you can watch it later. Again, Congressman Cunningham, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.